Good morning, everyone. We're here for ordinary meeting number 7 of 2018 of the Fraser Coast Regional Council. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. We meet at the northern end, Burham River, the Butchla country, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. First item on our agenda is the opening prayer from Norma Doyle of St. John's Anglican Church. Good morning, Norma.
Good morning, George. Thank you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for everything that widens our knowledge and equips us more fully for life, living, and for building communities. We ask that you preside over this meeting and the labours of those present, and to bless all their endeavours. May your Spirit guide discussions during this meeting as those present discuss and deliberate on issues of importance to this Council and this region. May those here be wise in discernment, balanced in judgment, fair in decision-making, and visionary in planning. May they continue to serve our communities and respect the world you have created for us. Teach our representatives, both elected and appointed, to know their own strengths, that they may fully use the gifts and talents you have given them. Though they may have differing views, may they be mindful in their words and act for what is best for residents and enterprises across our regional area. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Norma. We have 10 councillors here, which is until next week the total amount, so there are no apologies. Before we proceed down the agenda, though, through a mix-up of the papers, there was one public participant who we missed out on, so I understand Councillor Everett's going to move a procedural motion that standing orders be suspended. That's a procedural motion that standing orders be suspended to allow one final public participation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Truscott. I'll put the procedural motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. So there's one final public participant, Beverly Chu, to speak about proposed footpath. Good morning, Beverly.
Thank you.
Dennis, do you want to give her that microphone?
Hi everybody. I'm here to represent many of my friends and neighbours from Travis Road, Bushnell Road and Burren Street, South End. We discussed it and are in support of the Travis Master Plan, especially the footpath connecting Dudley Street and southeast to the end of the Esplanade. And some of the reasons are the intersection between Burren Street, Bushnell Road and Travis Road is actually really quite dangerous. This is the only all-weather way to walk, ride bikes or use mobility scooters in and out of this area. Burren Street is also a very busy street, making the road quite dangerous for bikes, mobility scooters and walkers that travel this road frequently. Burren Street also gets very hot in the summer and is at times most unpleasant. At high tide, the beach is impossible, and the proposed path adjacent to the foreshore will be a great asset to many of our locals and visitors. This would allow a safe environment for kids on their bikes, the elderly on their mobility scooters and wheelchairs, and even our keen walkers to enjoy an all-weather, all-tide walk along our beautiful foreshore. Although we can walk there now, it is often too wet or the grass too long, and not that I've seen any, but there have been reports of snakes in the long grass and is currently not suitable for mobility scooters or bikes or even me in my crutches. Another issue is to protect the trees and the native grasses along the foreshore. These do a wonderful job protecting our frontal dune and even our homes. I believe there is another tree mysteriously dying in Traviston Park, and I would like Council to take a closer look at these when they have to be cut down. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Councillor Everett's moving the motion that standing orders be resumed. Seconded Councillor Truscott. With the procedural motion that standing orders be resumed. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried. The next item, and I'll ask the public to be patient with us on this because this is a fairly new procedure which is a bit more onerous than it used to be, disclosure of interests. Are there any interests to be disclosed? Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
This is going to be a good experience with this. Is this one better?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, in relation to ordinary item 16.1.1, the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct Business Plan, and also in relation to item 16.1.2, which is the application for new leases for the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. My first conflict is the 16.1.1, the business plan, where I wish to advise the council of a perceived conflict of interest in this matter, as defined by the Act. I am the president of Football Queensland Wide Bay. This is a not-for-profit organisation which is referred to in the business plan with reference made to occupancy and stakeholder engagement of the precinct. In relation to how I will be dealing with this matter, I will be declaring as a conflict of interest and leading the meeting whilst the matter is discussed and voted on. In relation to the substantive matter, the other matter, 16.1.2, which is the application for a new lease in the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. This one is, and I've passed the forms through, is a real conflict. In the same way, I'm the president of the Football Queensland Wide Bay. They are one of the subject parties relating to the application for a new lease, and for this reason I'll be also removing myself from the room when this matter is discussed and also voted on. Mr. Mayor, I draw your attention to 16.1.3, which relates to the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct Project 2018-19 budget allocation. This matter was actually discussed during the budget process, and a determination was made by you that this was an ordinary matter of council. It is a budget matter. It specifically relates to the whole precinct, and I'd be seeking that you either declare this as an ordinary business matter or that we determine that it should be discussed as part of the conflict process.
Thank you. I reconfirm that determination that it's a budget matter, it's an ordinary business matter. Are there any further disclosures of interest? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'll raise in relation to item 16.1.1. That's in relation to the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct Business Plan. I'll declare that I have a perceived conflict of interest in relation to this matter. I'll allow the council, of course, to determine this. The nature of my interest in this matter is Football Queensland Wide Bay is referenced to in this plan, and to be located at this Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. Football Queensland Wide Bay has 4 representative cities, including Football Maryborough. Football Maryborough is made up of all local clubs across the city, one being Granville Football Club, which I'm a patron of. So I don't believe that there is a real or perceived, but I've raised it anyway just to allow my councillor colleagues to make this determination. As said, I have a relationship with Granville Football Club, which is a member club of Football Maryborough. They're part of Football Queensland Wide Bay, which includes Bundaberg, Gympie, Harvey Bay and Maryborough. As said, Football Queensland Wide Bay are part of Football Queensland. So, as said, I'm a patron of that, and in previous years I've also said I've played football and was on the Football Queensland Wide Bay Committee and also president of Football Maryborough, which I'm no longer of and haven't been there for nearly a year. So, I'll raise that to 16.1.1 and 16.1.2. Oh, sorry, yes. How I'll deal with that is I've determined that this personal interest is not sufficient. It's not of sufficient significance that it will lead me to making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I will best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participation in this discussion and voting on this matter. However, I acknowledge that the remaining councillors must now determine pursuant to the section 175E, section 4, whether I have a real or conflict of interest in relation to this matter. To you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. First of all, I'll move that Councillor Sanderson has a perceived conflict of interest in relation to agenda item 16.1.1.
Mr Chair, can I raise an issue or ask for clarification?
It is my understanding that I have a perceived conflict. The legislation refers to the fact that, as far as I understand, is that I can still vote on someone else's perceived conflict. However, it does relate to the same organisation that I'm a part of. So I don't know whether I have a perceived conflict in relation to voting on a perceived conflict. So I would seek your instruction whether I should withdraw, in this case, from making any vote. And I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. I think perhaps it'd be cautious to withdraw.
I'll mainly
Yeah.
No, because it's legal agreement.
No, the budget.
The budget, you've made a determination.
Okay, so do we need a seconder for my motion?
Yes.
Yeah, is there a seconder? Councillor Everard. So the motion is that Councillor Sanderson has a perceived conflict of interest in relation to agenda item 16.1.1. And we'll note for the minutes that Councillor Taylor is leaving the room.
For the vote?
Yes, it's not an abstention. Yep. Would the mover and seconder reserve their right to speak? Councillor Mattern. Yep.
Just in relation to this, Mr Mayor, I actually took the time to seek advice from the Integrity Commissioner because at this stage I believe I'm still also a patron of the Granville Football Club, and the advice that I've received from the Integrity Commissioner is on the balance. I don't have a conflict or don't need to declare anything. So in taking a vote on Councillor Sanderson's situation, I thought it prudent to bring this advice to the knowledge of the council.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion that
Actually declared at this stage, so.
Yeah, but the advice from the Integrity Commissioner is, that's not, but it may influence.
Yeah, whether or not
vote on
people,
that decision.
that's right, yeah. I'll put the motion that Councillor Sanderson has a perceived conflict of interest in relation to agenda item 16.1.1. All in favour?
So what are we voting on?
Whether Councillor Sanderson has a perceived conflict of interest. Yeah, all in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there my candidate? Yeah, no, sorry. The 4? All opposed? Additions wrong? And Daniel's on vote, yeah, so it's 4. So it's a tie vote. I'll exercise my casting vote under the standing orders to declare that he has a perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you.
And then under this new regime, I did ask for patience. Under the new regime, we now have a second vote, which is how the matter is dealt with. And I move that Councillor Sanderson may participate, discuss, and vote on agenda item 16.1.1, notwithstanding that there is a perceived conflict of interest. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor Everard. Are there any speakers on that? Does everyone understand?
So it's to say that he can stay.
Yeah. Following the vote that there is that he has perceived conflict, this is that he can stay. If there are no speakers, I'll put the motion. All in favour? 2, 3, 4. It's hard to count when you're under pressure. 8. Any opposed? None. That's carried unanimously. Are there any? Then
Should that relate to 16.2?
no, we've got to deal with that separately.
16.2.
Yeah. So 16.1.2. Did you want to speak to that now?
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Taylor has indicated that he's left the room.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for raising the item. Similar 16.1.2, which is in relation to the new leases application. As declared previously, I have a perceived conflict of interest in relation to this matter. very similar. The nature of my interest in this matter is Football Queensland is part of the leasing recommendation. Football Queensland YFA is a member organisation, Football Queensland Limited. As said, Football Queensland is made up of 4 representative cities to this organisation, and this includes Football Maryborough. As said, Football Maryborough is made up of all the local clubs across the city, including Granville Football Club, which I'm a patron of. So, as I've also stated in the previous item, I've also declared in previous meetings that I've played football, which I, of course, love the sport. Was on the Football Queensland Bay Committee, which I'm no longer on, and also president of Football Maryborough, which was transitioned last year. Nature of my interest in this matter is, of course, the nature of Granville Football Club interest in this matter is nil. The decision is being made by Football Queensland Limited. So how I'll deal with this is very similar. I've determined that this personal interest isn't of sufficient significance that it will lead me to make a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I'll best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participation and discussion and voting on this matter. However, I acknowledge that the remaining councillors must now make a decision pursuant to section 175E, section 4, whether or not I have a real or perceived conflict of interest in relation to this matter and whether I need to leave the meeting or stay in the meeting.
So just to clarify, you're still the patron of the Granville Football Club,
Yes.
which under no circumstances is going to have a lease.
That's right.
Yeah, but you're part of White Bay Football. Yes, that's it.
Football Maryborough.
I'll put the motion so it can be tested anyway. You understand this is quite out there. That Councillor Sanderson has a perceived conflict of interest in relation to agenda item 16.1.2. Is there a seconder for that? May not be.
Well, you need to make a determination. It needs to
Yeah,
be
well,
second.
yeah. Is there a seconder? If there's no seconder, it's seconded by Councillor Light. Did anyone wish to speak to this motion? I'll put the motion. All in favour? 2? Okay. Against? 6. That's lost. I'll put a motion that Councillor Sanderson does not have, the Councillor Sanderson does not have either a real or perceived conflict of interest in the matter and is accordingly free to participate in the meeting while agenda item 16.1.2 is discussed, including by voting on the matter. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Truscott, are there any speakers? All in favour? So that's 7 against 1, 7 to 1. That's carried. Are there any further speakers? Any further notice to be disclosed? Councillor Light?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought I was going to not have one, but considering this late item which Councillor Chapman has brought forward, 11.2, regarding a park in Augustus Estate, to inform the Chamber that my wife and I own a property in the Augustus Estate through my late mother's estate of last year. Considering of the time it's taken for all these different new things that we need to do under the legislation, I believe it's prudent for me just to leave the room to expedite the matter.
Okay, so that matter doesn't need to be voted on. Councillor, so is that a perceived or a real?
I'll say it's real.
Yeah, you might as well.
Yeah,
Real. Yeah.
it's real.
We'll leave the real conflict. Are there any further disclosures of interest? If people think of any as we go, please speak up. It's much better if you do than you don't. Okay. If there's no further conflicts of interest, I'll just check with executive. We've dealt with it. Yep. Okay. And thank you for your patience. It's a new legislation across the state that we're required to comply with. The next item is item 4, mayoral minutes. There are no mayoral minutes. Ordinary item 5.1 is the special meeting, which was the budget meeting, and that's pages 5 to 39.
I'll move it, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, Councillor Light has moved that the minutes be accepted as true and correct. Is it Councillor Madden? Are there any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? 10. All opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 5.2. Repeat it up. Item 5.2, ordinary meeting 6 of the 27th of June. That's pages 40 to 67. Is there a mover that they be accepted as true and correct, or any amendments? Councillor Truscott? Yes?
Thank you. Just noticing on page 56 of the agenda, where the division was called for the vote on the outdoor funerals public consultation. I've just noticed there, I think it's incorrect. It has Councillor Everard noted there as voted for, but Councillor Everard wasn't there at the time. I believe that should be Councillor Light.
Is that right?
Yeah, I know. 238 I was back.
Yeah, you were, Councillor Everard was at Consulus's funeral. And Councillor Light was there the whole meeting.
Yes.
Yep. So that, with that amendment, are there any other, do we got that yet? Are there any other amendments before we deal with the minutes? Are you happy to move them as amended? Councillor Truscott, is there a seconder? Councillor Hanson, any speakers? If not, I'll put that the minutes as amended be accepted as true and correct. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is the report on public participation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had 9 members of the public participate in public participation today. The first person was Dennis Sage. He was objecting to the Drury Lane development and its impact on the visual amenity of nearby residents. The next person was Steve Kennan. He was objecting to the proposed Turtle Cove development and its impact on the natural environment and lifestyle enjoyed by residents. We also had a Mr. Jack Di Pasquale, who was objecting to the proposed Turtle Cove development and the impact of sewage treatment on the natural environment. We also had a Ms. Debbie Duffy, who was objecting to the proposed Turtle Cove development and raised concerns in relation to the aged care facility, the impacts of sewage on the environment and health of residents. Mr. Mayor, we also had a Mr. Peter Dorr speaking on Turtle Cove. He objected to the proposed Turtle Cove development and the risk associated with the presence of acid sulphate soils, use of pesticides, environmental buffers and sewage treatment. We also heard from Mr. Graham Woad, and he provided an update on a number of issues and concerns regarding flood management in the Fraser Coast region. And we heard from Michelle Luxley, who objected to the golf course development and impact on the wetland environment. And finally, from Mr. Brad French, who was objecting to the proposed Ozcare development and its impact on the surrounding residential neighbourhood. At the beginning of the council meeting with the suspension of standing orders, we also heard from Ms. Beverly Chu, who was requesting an all abilities path close to the Burren foreshore to be built for residents and visitors to enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. The next item is item 7, that's deputations. I don't know,
Yes,
do we have to vote to accept that, do we?
Yes.
Okay, what's the
Tonight.
that motion?
Tonight.
Okay, do you wish to move that the report on public participation be noted? Is there a second, Councillor Everard? I'll put the motion, Councillor Lewis. No, he's just commenting. Just second, Councillor Everard, yeah.
Just a point of information, I think it's Brett French rather than...
Oh, okay.
French.
Sorry. Thank you. And my apologies to Brett.
If no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, could I put forward a procedural motion, please?
Yeah.
Procedural motion, standing orders be suspended so that we can advance item 10.3.6. It relates to public participation. There was many members in the audience there from that community, and considering of the mature standing of this particular item is way in the agenda, I would seek a procedural motion to suspend standing orders to bring that forward. Yep. Item 10.3.6, Drury Lane.
Yep. There's no urgent petitions that anybody needs to address. Okay. If not, I'm happy you can put the motion.
Yes.
That item 10.3.6 be brought forward to be dealt with.
Doesn't need a second.
Doesn't need a seconder. I'll put the procedural motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. So we'll go to item 10.3.6, which is pages 484 to 499.
I'll move it, Mr Mayor, and I'm also flagging amendments to the recommendations.
So can you indicate what you're moving?
I'll be moving the officers' recommendations, but including, and please, I ask the audience and particularly the chamber to be patient because obviously I've been away on leave until only yesterday, so it's a little bit on the run. But I want to add, which I have on my iPad, which I can forward through to
Before you go too much further, can you speak into one of the microphones?
Sorry about that. I have points 5 and 6, which I wish to add to the officers' recommendations, which I can now send through to Marlene and to all councillors.
No, I don't have access to email, so.
Yeah. You'll need to read it out. You'll need to read it.
Okay, so point 5 of the officers' recommendations, I will forward it to councillors and it will make it a little bit easier for the councillors to read this as I go through. So I've just forwarded that to councillors. I'll forward it to the CEO, I should have done that, my apologies. So I forwarded it to you, Mr CEO, and to A1 councillors. I'm assuming, does anyone require a copy of this?
Can you read it out?
I'll be reading it out. Sorry, Mr Mayor. 5, the council creates an earth buffer zone on the western side of the water detention basin, formerly referred to as Yarrowlee Lagoon, and plant 200 trees, bracket 200 actually in numbers, 2 metres, 2 in bracket metre high trees, a species that matures to approximately 15 to 30 metres, that trees to be planted on the western side of Yarrowlee Lagoon. 6, pursuant to impose special conditions on block 1 to 10 regarding proposed usage and reduced height levels.
So, Mr Mayor, just as buffer zone names and what it's not specific.
Yeah. Well, there's the 2 very different aspects to that. Do you want to, first of all, I'll ask if there's a seconder for that so we can discuss it.
Can we clarification?
Yeah. Well, perhaps if there is a seconder, then we'll know if it needs clarification, and then we can. Yeah. So Councillor Chapman's indicating. Yeah. So perhaps you can clarify. We'll go to the first one first, as I think that's a bit simpler and less. If you just want to go to the first one and talk about what you mean by a buffer zone.
A buffer zone.
And anything else.
An earth buffer zone, so it would be a mound determined to lessen the impact of the industrial development that's on that side. A determined height and volume determined by council and officers to provide a buffer zone for that residential community to separate the residential side of it and the industrial side. I haven't got engineering in the sense of particular sizes, but we need to have some type of buffer zone, and that could be determined in the future by council.
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is that the good microphone, or did we get rid of that one?
Hello.
You're there.
So I just want to clarify if I could ask a question on an earth buffer zone. I understand from a planning scheme and from a development application a buffer zone, but to add a mound, for us to put in a motion to council, perhaps this might actually be directed at the officer. What considerations would have to be given in relation to flood mitigation and the issues that effectively a earth wall could create? And is it wise to progress a motion that refers to a potential flooding issue for both parties if you were to put effectively a dam wall? I mean, effectively that's what you could have. So I'd like some clarity on examples of a earth buffer zone and whether those sorts of issues need to be considered.
And just before you go that quick, something just occurred to me. We're talking about a property that's owned by third parties who aren't here, whose interests are affected. Can this matter be dealt with in the open? especially the second part when you're talking about somebody's development approval over their land.
It can be done.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
But I think
I'm
it's
sorry.
more important issues.
Yeah.
Concerns.
Okay, yeah, right, sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Do you want me to respond to Stuart's?
I think you directed it to either Jamie or,
I've been directed to Jamie.
yep.
The area that we're talking about has been engineered design for stormwater management. So it has a standing water level, it has a Q100 level. Any revision of a earth mound in that area would have to be designed. So to determine, one, how much we cannot impact upon what is the capacity of that area. So basically remove storage capacity with it. Removal of storage capacity will have an impact both downstream and upstream. And two, it is also about ensuring there's enough room within that particular design to also get maintenance and access between the properties and the buffer, and as well as to the wetland. So it would be subject to an engineering design as well as looking at the hydraulic calculations and design for that area.
I think we can continue discussing this and it's useful, but I just want to point out that the standing order item 13.4 provides matters or motions relating to but not limited to amending and changing disbursement of funds, budgets, capital work priorities, and policy decisions will be subject to a council report prior to any council resolution. And we have a report before us, but I don't think it deals with what is actually being proposed. So I'm happy for us to continue, but I don't know if this motion, and I'll rule that it doesn't, because that is a 200-meter long buffer zone, if you're talking about a mound, is a significant amount of capital disbursement. So my ruling, once it comes to it, and again, I'm happy for us to discuss, is that it wouldn't be compliant with our standing orders to commit to such a capital disbursement without a report.
Well, can I ask a question on
Yeah.
that?
And I understand this has been going on for some time, but as the mover,
That's right.
Council, would you consider an alternative to that would say investigate the buffer zone, including a potential earth, an earth structure or an earth buffer zone, rather than actually tie us to a council resolution that could either have some detriment to the natural environment, but also to our budget. Is that something that you would consider?
Yes, I would be.
And I guess, Mr. Mayor, would that then alleviate your...
Yeah, that would certainly be, that's the standard, we're seeking a report, so we can then make an informed decision. Yeah.
So just need to investigate a buffer zone. So
To seek a report on those issues.
Well, it'd be good if you, to keep the actual substance of it, you investigate a report to consider council creating an earth buffer zone and then keeping the original words. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing lost in it, but it's complying as much as we can. So that deals with an amendment to 5. Were there any more questions on, and I think you want to change the numbering, so advise the concerned residents accordingly become 6. But were there any more questions on that aspect? Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question to Jamie, I guess. If this went through, what impact would that have on land that's zone that's similar or the same? And if that's the case, would that be dealt with on a case-by-case basis?
I thought, sorry, a point of order here. I thought we were still discussing the first part.
Yeah, just because it's sort of very different, can we just, before we go to the new .6, we just ask if there's any more questions about 5? Councillor, is that right? Councillor? Yes. Councillor Lewis?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Could it be the main pipe? You could
Perhaps it's my pacemaker. Two questions. Two questions, am I coming through? Okay. Firstly, can I just clarify where this buffer zone is? This looking at the plan on page 487, seems to be in lot 10. Is that still part of the owner's land, or is that part of public land? That's the owner's land. But that's public land, so, okay, fine. The second question really is just because I'm a little unclear as to where this proposed 0.5 ended up. Is that report also going to deal with the trees? I mean, the notion that we should specify what sort of trees are appropriate is probably a bit hazardous. 15 to 30 metre trees at mature height aren't going to offer much. Generally speaking, they're not going to offer much foliage lower down where you have the side issues. But is it the case that the report will address both the issues concerning the buffer zone and the appropriate planting of species?
Yep. I would hope so.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's my understanding that the proposed amendments 5 and 6 are contained in this one resolution, and that will address the issues that you've just raised.
Yep.
Maybe I could just answer that, Councillor Lewis. I was being particular in terms of rough approximate heights because I did not want trees to be planted that didn't mature any more than 2 metres. And also it was to give some type of clarification in terms of the coverage that type of trees could provide.
So just to seek clarification from Mr CEO, you're saying 0.6, which is imposed special conditions, is included in that report as well, or
No,
not?
we're going to deal
We
with that.
haven't dealt with that yet.
Yes,
Okay.
that's very, no, that's a really different thing. 0.66, yeah. Just for simplification, it's better if we limit questions to this and then speak
Yeah.
about that, yeah. And it may be that, I mean, we need a report about that too, if we're going to, yeah.
So,
But just for the purpose of discussion, I think we need to,
off the purpose
yeah,
of
finish,
discussion.
yeah, maybe that's the motion in the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Have we spoken through the trees and the earth buffer? Yeah, Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to clarify to the residents that if this has been modelled and we actually put in a buffer zone, a soil buffer zone, and we do get flooding in that area and it hasn't been designed correctly, their places could flood. So everything's got to be done correctly and it's all got to be modelled to do things like this. So I'd just like to put the residents' minds to rest that it will be done properly.
Yep. Okay, we'll move on to a discussion about the secondary part of the motion. Did you want, so that reads, pursuant to impose special conditions on blocks 1 to 10 regarding proposed usage and reduced height limits. Were there any questions to the mover on this issue? Councillor Madden.
I'd like to
Yeah.
ask a question of the staff.
Yeah, Councillor Madden. Legislative resolution.
To the town planning staff, and whoever would like to take the question, what are the implications? Because under the current zoning and applications, do we have the capacity to legally impose special conditions? The answer is no.
That's one.
Can I respond to that, please? I think it's dangerous to be talking about legal positions in an open forum. The report will address any matters that of legality.
Well, I think it's important to answer a question that is very specific about the planning scheme. If not specifically about this one, but can you impose special conditions? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. I mean, it's not going into any confidential matter.
Yeah, the question, can you impose special conditions, is a different question, is can we legally, and what are the legal implications? So I prefer not to answer the legal implications. I'm happy for my staff to answer the question, can we impose special conditions, and that leave the aspects in terms of legalities and potential legal liability out of the response.
Through the chair, the subsequent development on these blocks when they're completed for industrial purposes is accepted development where they comply with a standard set of prescribed conditions, and accordingly there's no capacity, provided they do that, or it's not necessary for them to lodge any formal application, and accordingly no capacity if there's no application for council to apply conditions. Any application that came to council would only be generated where the development did not meet an acceptable outcome in the condition, and whereby that application would address and only be for the condition or the element they didn't comply with. If that non-compliance was of a significant nature, there would be the capacity, obviously, of putting the conditions that mitigate any perceived impact of that, both not only to the surrounding area but also the adjoining industrial lots.
Right. Were there any further questions, or does the mover wish to, and a seconder wish to amend? Yes,
I've got some questions
Yep.
of Jamie. The type of industries that they can have there, and I haven't got the list right in front of me, so would it be true to say the following industries approximately would be wrecking yards, chemical storage yards, foundries, those type of industries? That's one of the questions. And the second question, what is the highest limit they could go to in height with those buildings on lots 1 to 10?
Through the Chair, the list of activities are attached to the report, Councillor, so pages 494, they commence, and it goes through the medium impact industry, so it's a metal foundry of less than 10 tonnes, water making, dangerous goods, razor, blasting, enamel. There's limitations on medium. The planning scheme works on the basis that it differentiates medium and a high impact industry primarily on quantity of materials either processed or produced. The second question is set out I've attached to the actual development use codes for industry use codes, which is page 496. You will see that the current building heights is in A01.1, which is an acceptable outcome, A01.1, which is 15 metres in the medium impact industry zone for the height of the building, as compared to 10 in low and 20 in high.
So to put that in perspective, 15, 20 metres, would that be the height of Bunnings?
I'll only be taking a guess at that. Councillor, I'd say Bunnings normally is around 12 metres.
So we can have a building only a breath away from a residential zone, bigger than Bunnings, and having a metal foundry in there, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is there any, so it's code accessible, would that be correct as well?
No, Councillor, it's accepted development. So they need to comply with the codes, but it's self-accessible against the codes.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions?
As it stands, I'm comfortable to vote for a motion that would ask for a report in relation to buffers. If the mover and the seconder were proposing to add to continue on with the special conditions, I wouldn't be able to support it.
Oh, he's asking a question, yeah.
So I'm asking whether or not he's voting.
Mr Mayor, I considered that I appreciate this won't get through this motion if I'm calling it number 6, be number 5, I think, would to remain in the motion. So with the permission of the seconder, I will take it out. But I tend to bring this matter to council in the next meeting in some form of motion, other motion.
So do you wish to keep it in there seeking a report? Or take it out entirely?
It's been moved and
Yeah,
seconded.
okay, I'm just trying to clarify what the amendment is. I think he said he's taking it out
Taking item 6 out.
entirely.
You referred to a report for item 5, which we have not talked about.
Yeah, so just delete. Okay. That would be how you could progress this.
Well, okay, then a report with an investigation or report in number 6 as well.
And 6 as well.
Yeah. Okay. So the motion, we just clarify exactly what motion is now.
The council requests report and proposed amendments to point 5 and point 6 put forward by councillor Light, which are, I'll have to read it
Yeah.
out because we don't have that. I've got it. So the resolution, as I understand it, is that the council requests a report on the proposed amendments to point 5 put forward by councillor Light, which point 5 and 6 put forward by councillor Light, which are the council create an earth buffer zone on the western side of the water detention basin, fondly referred to as Yarrowlee Lagoon, and plant 200 2-metre high trees, a species that matures to approximately 15 to 30 metres, that trees to be planted on the western side of the Yarrowlee Lagoon. And 6, pursuant to, impose special conditions on block 1 to 10 regarding proposed usage and reduced height limits.
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Chapman?
I'd just like to ask one question.
Yeah.
Just like to ask one question. Has the people that are actually developing this land, through the chair or through the CEO, this concern's been going on for a while, has the council actually consulted them at all?
The director may be able to respond to that.
Through the chair. Several discussions have been held with the AAC group who are developing the industrial estate in that area. Firstly, on the matter of exchanging the hydronaut seeds mix from turf, which was the original condition approval, to include those species as listed in 7.1.1 on the table. Secondly, at a subsequent meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed the matter of their development and where they were at. The concerns have been raised. They understand our concerns, but they also have their own development objectives.
I'm just wondering about conditions on those blocks, if the council's actually spoke to them about them. If they've negotiated, I just sort of spoke to them about it, if they would be agreeable or not, or if there's nothing like that.
The director is shaking his head. Okay, there's no, Councillor Light, Councillor Chapman, no further speakers? No? In that case, everyone's clear on the amended motion?
Well,
Councillor Truscott, clarification?
We're just fixing it up now. So it's the original motion plus 5 that a report be provided to council.
Yeah, so what's currently up there is point 4, that will become point 6. And that both 5 and 6 should start with, but then it's about a report, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the essence of it, yeah.
We can keep 4 as the advice.
Yeah.
that shouldn't be an amendment, though, should it?
That was the motion that was put, so.
Yeah,
it's not
it is now the motion, because the mover and seconder have agreed, have changed it, so it's not an amendment, it is the motion. The mover and seconder have agreed to it, and that's theirs. Yeah, we haven't discussed the actual original report, but there's no further discussion, everyone's happy with that first report? In that case, I'll put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. We'll take a motion now to resume standing orders and return to the agenda. Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Light. I'll put that motion. All in favour? To resume standing orders and return to the agenda. Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is deputations. There are no deputations. Petitions. Are there any petitions to be tabled? No? Item 9 is Wide Bay Water and Waste Services Advisory Committee meeting minutes. That's pages 68 to 72. Councillor Madden has indicated she's happy to move it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Everard is seconding that. Sorry. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Madden?
No, it's self-explanatory.
Councillor Everard? Any speakers? No, I'll put the motion. that the minutes be received and noted. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Item 9.2 is the Wide Bay Water and Waste Services Advisory Committee Charter, pages 73 to 85. The recommendation is on page 73. Is there a mover? Councillor Mattern, seconded by Councillor Everett again. Who wish to speak to this item?
No, again, I think
Yep.
it's self-explanatory.
Councillor Everett. Any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Item 10.1.1 is the Open Resolutions Register, pages 86 to 105. The recommendation is on page 86, that it be received and noted. Is there a mover for that? Yeah, can we just wait to see if there's a mover first? Councillor Light, seconded Councillor Taylor. Was there a question, Councillor Truscott?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was just a couple of items that I was struggling to find in the Open Resolutions Register. One was two from the previous council meeting in June. One of them being the matter that I believe is item on the previous minutes, page 58, item 10.3.12, the one where the applicant was Hard Rock Quarries. And I believe we deferred the matter, and as far as I was aware at that meeting, it was to be brought back to this meeting. But it's not in the meeting or in the Open Resolutions Register.
That's right, it was going to be a deemed refusal if we must have agreement from the applicant, is that right? Yeah. So as I understand it, the applicant has agreed to extending it.
Right, so it should still be in the Open Resolutions Register then?
I'll have to follow that up, Mr. Mayor. I'll take that on notice.
The other one was also on page 56 about the outdoor funerals for going to public consultation. That one's also not in the Open Resolutions Register either. Also, just a couple others. There's some there that I had concerns about things where on page 102, one particular about the after-hours animal management. In previous meetings, it said in the May one that it would come to July, and then in June it said it would come to July, and now in July it's saying that it might come to a future one in a month's time after a workshop. And I'm wondering how in May it thought it would come to July if it would then months later have to go to a workshop.
We put that to the director.
Yeah, through the chair, the area of animal management is going through an operational review at this particular point in time, particularly with some high levels of staff turnover. That's looking at the structure and formulating that. And that relates directly to the services and the request, and it would be, it's necessary that we secure that down within that working area before we formulate back to the council the implications of what's been asked.
I can talk to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can just add to that. I think from memory and discussion with the executive, the council has in its budget to consider building a new animal housing facility, a refuge or a pound, and we believe that the after hours animal management should be considered as part of the operations, the design, operations and management of our animal management facilities, so we want to have a holistic approach. And we thought the best way to do that was to have a sit-down workshop with councillors to talk about proposed locations of pounds, the operational issues associated with proposed locations, indicative designs and ongoing operations. So it was looking at a comprehensive review rather than looking at after-hours service provision only. in addition to the issues that Janie has raised.
Thank you. Just a couple others. On page 97, there was some there. There's a couple there, both the SunSmart Fraser Coast and also for Fraser Coast tree planting. I suppose this seems to be a concern that has come up a few times in somewhere. These were from January, and in the notes it mentions that it'll be brought to March, April, May, June, it's now July, and now saying August. So I'm just seeing a common occurrence where if it's being told to us that we would expect it at this meeting and then not seeing it to the next one and then the next one and then the next one. So I'm not trying to have a go, but I'm just sort of seeking what assurance that when we're told it'll be at a meeting, that we should see that at a meeting.
Just in relation to the Fraser Coast tree planting report did come to me, and I rejected that report and put it back to officers because I don't think it addressed the issues and the concerns that were raised. I think it was too generic in nature, otherwise it would have come to this meeting. I take your comments in relation to where we made a recommendation that something's going to come to council. We need to be able to honour and stick to that.
Yeah, Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of questions of the relative officers. On page 91, in back of 5th of July 2017, so we're talking a year ago, I put a motion forward, seconded by Councillor Chapman, regarding measurable meetings. If I can have an update on how that's progressing, particularly with the Governance Review Committee as well.
Did you want to talk as chair of the
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Light. In relation to that work, it was added as part of the recommendations that came out of another report, and the Governance Committee has been working with councillors and staff to progress a number of recommendations. They relate to also how we're going to progress with portfolios and how we are going to manage our affairs and govern our council. There has been a lot of work done in this space, and I think we're up to our final meeting next week, where we will start to formulate some of the, the meat on the bone in relation to a range of issues, particularly relating to, and the one I'm most excited about, which is the reforming of the portfolio process to be a much more effective process, and some of you would have received information, or all councils would have received information in relation to how that is progressing. We've discussed it at briefings. The measurable reports which you're referring to and the recommendations relating to that will also be brought to council at the workshop I believe we're trying to organise after we've finalised our governance report. So this will be part of the workshop where we'll discuss these issues. It certainly has been discussed at length in the governance portfolio meetings.
Mr Mayor, and to the CEO, this is a resolution that's on this register. I would expect, and I appreciate the comments, Councillor Taylor, look forward to those workshops, but it does say a report from the CEO, from Council, to specifically address that result of that motion. So will a separate report covering that motion from a year ago be presented to Council, not part of another report?
Yeah, yes, the answer is yes. So we'll go through the workshop, we'll discuss it with councils, and a report will come from that to council addressing those issues.
Mr Mayor, I've got another question on page 93 regarding a motion I put up and seconded by you, Mr Mayor, regarding the complaints management policy. That was in November of last year. We're now coming into August of this year. Could I have an update, Mr CEO, regarding that?
I might refer to the Director on this one.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Through you, Mr Mayor. The report outlines the work that we commissioned through PIC Services to review our entire complaints management program. That work was concluded with a presentation to a councillor workshop. I think Councillor Light, you were on leave at the time that was presented. I understand that they also sought to engage with you separately to take your comments on that framework. The delay in, I guess, the final adoption of that framework is the new legislation that the state government has brought in as a result of the Belcara report. So we are updating the draft policies and frameworks that were developed by Peak Services with regard to the Belcara recommendations.
So my next question, when will we be receiving that report?
What we anticipate is bringing that report to the August meeting.
And to the comments you just made regarding Peak Services contacting me, I can inform you that they've never contacted me.
I can follow that up.
Are there any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion, moved by Councillor Light, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Motion being that the open resolutions register be received and noted. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.1.2, the organisational performance report, pages 106 to 140. The recommendation is on page 106, that the report for the period ended 30 June 2018 be received. Is there a mover for that motion? Councillor Madden, seconded Councillor Everard. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Madden?
No.
Are there any questions or speakers? Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 121, I just want to make a mention and to thank the staff, park staff particularly, for their work at the Anzac Park with the natural play area that has been installed there. It looks fantastic. I've had heaps of great feedback from the community using it, lots of families, lots of kids really enjoy it. So hats off to those guys, they did a terrific job. On page 127, there's just some things there that I thought probably in the past, but I just wanted to check and see, because there was, I just can't find, oh there we are, the mention of the PL Travers building. I'm just wondering if there's an update on when that will be open.
Do you want to speak to that, or Jamie?
Yeah, I'll take that question and make notice, but my understanding is that it was scheduled to be open around October, but I have to take that on notice.
We do want to have some of it open for open house.
Yeah, September, October, yeah.
I mean, because originally the intention was for it to be open Mary Poppins Festival last year, then Mary Poppins Festival this year, and at that stage I remember just before Mary Poppins Festival we were told it should only be another 3 weeks.
Yeah. A briefing note on this did go out in the last month, I'm pretty sure, talking about the timeframes.
I recall a slide note, I don't recall
So
October.
it's gone to council before, and it's October that was contained in the previous agenda. What date is that?
Mr. CEO, on page 41 of today's agenda, there's an item about the fees and charges in relation to that building, and it refers to commencing in October.
And I believe there is a briefing report which I can resend that provides details about the opening and what's being done in the interim. I can resend that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, talking about the Mary Poppins building, give a question on notice too. If this has gone on for so long, how much could I get a report on how much it's been overspent from what we approved to be spent on this building? Because that hasn't ever come back to council for any more recommendations for any more money.
So if that question can't be answered right now, it'll be taken on notice?
Take it on notice, Mr.
Yeah, no, I'll take it on notice for the next meeting. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Are there any further questions or speakers? No, I'll put the motion. Sorry, who was moving this one? Councillor Mattern, second Councillor Everard. Put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.1.3, becoming China ready, achieving tangible economic outcomes for Fraser Coast. And this is pages 141 to 154. The recommendation is on page 142. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sanderson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor Sanderson? Councillor Lewis? Are there any questions or speakers? Yeah, Councillor Truscott wishes to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a great opportunity that we've got here. I think we've got a great connection and relationship with the delegates and the people of Lashan as they've expressed from when they've visited here and from what we've heard from other councillors that have visited previously, and look forward to an opportunity to continue those relationships and to further grow those.
If there are no further speakers, I'll put the motion. Councillor Taylor.
Perhaps you could, through the chair, Mr. CEO, if you could just speak on part 2 of the resolution, approve Fraser Coast tourism events and council exploring cultural awareness and language training in the community in the next 24 months. If you could just, particularly in relation to the language training, speak on that and the implications.
I can talk very briefly about this, but the cultural awareness training is really important for business operators within the region that may be looking to attract Chinese business, for tourism business, but it's also important for schools as well to be culturally aware of other nationalities, and same with the language program. So we're looking at working with primary and secondary schools, and the cultural and language program courses can provide pathways into for those students into other pathways into career opportunities, and that's something that we'll be working with those schools.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's got in there that the FCTE, Fraser Coast Tourism Events and Council, explore cultural awareness and language training in the community in the next 24 months. I was thinking about taking that word community out, and I would just have there in the word cultural awareness and language training in the next 24 months, as I really feel that it's not only our community that we've got to train, is we've got a delegation that's looking to go into China. I feel that we've got to investigate this where the trips are actually sold, which is China to come to Australia. We've got to work out how we're going to get these people from China onto the planes to get them to Australia too. So it's not just our own community here. We've got to investigate in China how we can negotiate to get these people here also.
That's point 1, isn't it?
No, point 2.
No, point 1 is doing what you were asking. That's the China Ready program, which is here, which identifies those things.
No, I understood that China Ready was our people in Australia here were going to be ready for Chinese people to come here. What I'm saying is explore the cultural awareness and language training, because we've got barriers between when we went to China as Australians to talk the Chinese language, but when people go into the tourism bureaus and places like that, they've got to be able to sell that product that we've got.
Yeah, I think what you're saying isn't so much deleting in the community as adding internally and in the community. Internally and in the community, because it's the community we want to be China ready. We want our businesses to be China ready.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the cord for that other microphone has fallen out. I don't know if that's to do with Facebook.
It is working.
Kevin. Yeah, sorry.
So is that correct? Is that rather than deleting in the community, you're asking the mover to amend it to say internally and in the community?
Well, I feel that okay, we could be China ready, but at the same stages, if we've got a delegation going to China, I really think that should be in the same motion that we're moving, that we should be investigating also. There's no good at us being ready and not being able to get people here.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to do is in the same motion is put the package together. Put the package while you're over there in China, work out ways of breaking down the barriers and getting these people from China into the planes to get them to Australia, to the Fraser Coast.
Yeah, that's the aim of the whole thing.
What you're saying is actually the solution. relevant partnerships with Chinese travel supply networks. It's already in there. So they're the Chinese networks in China.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, there's the China Ready program with Fraser Coast Tourism Events and with Tourism Queensland refers to engaging with Chinese travel agents and also the employ of a China national working with Fraser Coast Tourism Events, which will deal with exactly what you're doing, and that's point 1 of this resolution. Point 2 is about developing a cultural awareness within our community and also specifically relating to language training, which then effectively has, point 1, as I understand it, is about building capacity to get people to our region, and then point 2 is effectively us being good people when people come to visit our region and to build relationships. So I think it does address what you're requesting, so I don't believe it needs to be amended.
If there are no further speakers, I'll put the motion. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Lewis. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is 10.1.4, Quarterly Report on Implementation of Council's Operation Plan, and that's pages 155 to 188. The recommendation is on page 155 that the report be received and noted. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Taylor? Is there a seconder? Councillor Everard, did you wish to speak to it?
No, I don't.
Are there any questions or speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.2.1, application for new lease for the East Burrell Rural Fire Brigade, and that's pages 189 to 192.
I'll move that.
Yeah, Councillor Light has indicated he's going to move the recommendation, and Councillor Chapman is seconding it. That's a recommendation over pages 189 to 190. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Any speakers? Yeah, Councillor Hanson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, are these still operational, this brigade?
It's sort of
My understanding is that this lease is with Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, and if there is a view to, I'm not quite sure, I can't comment whether they are currently operationally active, but if they are to be operationally active in any form, then the lease needs to be put in place.
Yeah, and they're using it as storage. If there are no further speakers or questions, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is ordinary item 10.2.2, the delegations register update, pages 193 to 199. Is there a mover for the recommendation over 193 to 194? Councillor Taylor, seconded Councillor Lewis. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
Are there any questions or speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Item 10.2.3 is pensioner concession and water charge relief policy. This is pages 200 to 209. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Lewis. That's the recommendation on page 200, that we adopt the pensioner concession policy and the water charge relief policy. Do you wish to speak to this? Are there any speakers or questions?
Yes, Mr.
Yes, Councillor Wright.
So I'm just trying to get my head around some parts of this agenda. We haven't been back at dark.
Yeah.
To the CEO, to maybe to the director, was this out of the budget? Thanks, Rob.
Through the chair, there was a restructure in the budget with respect to the revenue policy to trim it down to the prescribed components that in the Act. Previously, the pension concession was included in the revenue policy, so it was an oversight not to include this policy for consideration at the budget meeting.
Right, so it hasn't changed from the previous year of 175, what I can read here?
That's correct. The policy hasn't changed. The value of the concession is the same this year as it was last year. I understand last year was increased from $150 to $175.
Well, that's correct. I just thought I'd make that point that that was a budget initiative from the previous year that we increased that pensioner rate from 150 to 175.
That's right.
Thank you.
So we've got moved by Councillor Hanson, seconded by Councillor Lewis. If there are no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is 10.3.1, the material change of use preliminary approval and variation request for 20 and 35 Davis Drive, Kawanga. This is pages 210 to 244. Is there a mover for the officer's recommendation on pages 211 to 212? Councillor Chapman's and Keddy's moved that as it is. Is there a seconder? Councillor Madden. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Chapman? Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah. 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 Councillor Madden? Councillor Lewis, were you foreshadowing, or you're proposing an amendment?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I do want to propose an amendment. The substance of it is this. Sorry? No, I haven't sent that to the rest of you, no, but I can. What I want to do is to add to the recommendation, and I'll just read it out. Provided that in any subsequent approval, the building heights indicated on the plans and drawings attached to this report for buildings adjacent to the northern, eastern and southern boundaries shall be heights against the current (natural) ground levels. In the event that the ground levels are raised, then either the building height shall be reduced accordingly or additional boundary setbacks shall be provided to maintain the indicated height to setback proportion. That's the substance of it. I'm happy to talk to it if there's a second one.
We'll wait till if there's a second or last.
Did you want to ask Chapman if we accept the amendment?
Yeah, is that proposal,
Can you email so we can actually see it?
Can we read it? Yeah. And myself as well.
and then I'll ask the mover and seconder if they're happy for that to be incorporated. If they're not, and if there's a seconder, we'll ask the director to give his thoughts on it.
I'd actually like the directors.
Okay, before you make a decision on whether to incorporate it, you're saying you'd like to hear the director, yeah? Have you been emailed?
It's come through.
Mr Mayor, just to explain, this is a copy of something I sent to Jamie Coburn yesterday.
Through the chair, the condition as it reads would ensure that any changes in the land heights associated with designing the development would provide a proportional increase in the separation of the building. In the public participation this morning, a gentleman presented some photos which provided an indication of what's happened at the adjacent Kingston estate, whereby to ensure that stormwater and linear services, particularly sewage, work effectively, and that they've actually had to fill the land to profile. any filling of this particular site would be at a subsequent stage, and accordingly the provision of a condition that addressed that would be reasonable given the consideration of the length of the building. The result would be that if they moved it a metre, then proportionately you would still be looking at trying to achieve the exact same sight line. So if you raise the building, so if you looked at the building on natural ground level, and if they had to raise the metre, you would basically maintain the exact same view.
I just got one question. If you, at the moment, if on the natural ground level, they're allowed to go 8.5 metres high on a two-storey building. So if you're saying if they put a metre fill on there, their maximum height then would come back to 7.5? Because that would still, what I'm saying is, okay, you put a metre of fill on there, you actually pushing the building back, but that height, still 8.5 out on the boundary line of where they can build to, or what they've asked for now, that point, what you're saying is if they put fill in there and the building's only 6 metres high out there, they still have not gone over what they've actually asked for. That the council, if you can understand where I'm coming from.
Not entirely sure I do. Essentially what the proposal would mean is that if they put a metre of fill in, then they'd have a couple of options. One would be to reduce the maximum height of the building from 8.5 to 7.5 with the same setback. The alternative would be to, if they wanted to leave the building at the same height, that is at 8.5 from the new ground level, 9.5 from the existing, then they could increase the setback from 6 metres to whatever is necessary to maintain, in effect, the same angle of sight from the property boundaries to the east, say, to the roof line. It's not an exact proportion because obviously currently we're looking at, if you think of it as a right angle triangle, we're looking at a base of 6 metres and a height of 8.5. If you increase your height by a metre, you're going to have to increase your setback by more than a metre, if my fading memory of geometry serves me. Or of course you could do a combination of both. I'm not totally certain that this is a perfect solution, but it's just some amelioration of the proposal.
Do you have enough information to determine whether you incorporate it?
Can I also ask the officer one other question? What was approved on there prior to this application? What heights could you build to?
Sorry, councillors, through the chair. The local area plan provides for a variety of land uses. The height that's identified in the actual local area plan as code provides for a built form up to about 15 metres. So, I mean, the indication within the actual local area plan does identify that we're looking for a lower intensity type of development towards those eastern and northern boundaries, which that low intensity type of use is relevant to what you'd see with a residential building, so of a two-storey nature. So this is consistent with what's actually applicable under our local area plan. Oh, sorry, apologies. Previous development that was approved over the land involved a development known as the Securities development. That was entailing a development, I think, that was up to about 6 stories across the site. It was relevant setbacks, but it was a reasonable sized development, and it was quite, density was quite intense towards the actual boundaries, which triggered down from the top to 6 stories down to, I think it was about 2 to 3 levels to those adjoining boundaries. So this development actually is of a lower intensity to what was previously approved.
Mr Mayor, I can't approve that amendment.
Yep. Okay, is there a seconder for the amendment? Yeah. Councillor Taylor has indicated there's a seconder to the amendment. We'll treat that, can you bring up to where we're understanding orders?
Yep, so we need to deal with the
yeah,
amendment now.
that's right, yeah. So the amendment to the motion has been moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Just so we just get this right, yeah.
So you just treat it as
as a regular motion. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My concern here is that what I'm trying to do is to achieve some certainty for the residents, given that as I understand it, the passing of this substantive motion will make the further development, further applications in relation to this development code accessible. So essentially what I'm trying to do is put some guidelines around that code assessment for future development. We've heard from a number of residents, in particular on the eastern boundary of the block, who are quite concerned about the impact which even an 8.5 metre structure would have on their properties with a 6 metre setback. Further to the north of that, my understanding is that what is proposed is a lower building but with a lesser setback, so a similar problem applies there. It can be seen from the photographs which were presented to us this morning, from photographs which I circulated to all councillors earlier in the week, that in relation to the development to the south, they filled that extensively and then put on top of the fill a 1.8 metre dividing fence. Given that the fill is something like around about 1.5 metres, the effect of that is that you've got from the perspective of the owners to the east, they're looking at a dividing fence of 1.8 plus 1.5, whatever that is, what's it, 3 metres, 3.3 metres or thereabouts. That's a very high fence to have at your back boundary. Similarly, a similar problem is going to arise if there's fill placed along that boundary and then the developers want to put an 8.5 metre building on top of that. As Mr. French pointed out this morning, in effect it's still 3 metres because not much of the basement is below ground level. I'm not sure that my amendment satisfies their requirements at all. In fact, I don't think it does. And I think a better interface of this development with the existing low-density res to the east and to the north would be that the higher buildings were centred towards the middle of the development, where they'll really only be fronting this new proposed road and so on. I think that would be a better outcome, but in the spirit of compromise and I suppose dealing with what might be remotely possible, I'm putting forward this as a means of at least limiting the height of the buildings to a height relevant to or relative to the current ground level. I think that will avoid some of the problems in terms of overshadowing and severe bulk. I take the point, as has been made elsewhere, that in medium density res or even low density res you could have an 8.5 metre house. But this has three components. It's not merely the possibility of an 8.5 metre building, but it's the possibility of an 8.5 metre building on top of 1.5 metres of fill, altering the relevant ground level of the two properties. And it's a building, in the case of the one to the southeast, of some 48 metres long. That's a very, very bulky building. And I mean, if you had simply separate houses of 8.5 metres with large areas in between them, it wouldn't be nearly as intrusive as a bulk building, no matter what the architectural features of that 48 metre wall might be. So it's just an attempt to, I guess, to lock in some guidelines, some boundaries in terms of future development, so that natural expectations of those people in the low-density residential zone to the east and to the north can be maintained as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor is the seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In relation to the previous resolution of council last council meeting, a number of councillors, including myself, raised concern and asked for this matter to be deferred. And as reflected in the report on page 212, moved by Councillor Chapman and seconded by Councillor Light, the council officers raised with the proponent issues regarding the relocation of the three-storey buildings and consider the impacts of shadowing on the adjoining properties and to consider the setbacks. That negotiation and discussion obviously took place, and the compromise is not something that it's still very challenging for me to support this resolution or this recommendation of the officers based on the discussion. So, as I understand, the relocation of those buildings has not taken place, although there has been some compromise in relation to the height. Having said that, that could then, through negotiation, could change again at a later stage. I guess what this does, in my mind, it sets a little bit more rigour around those heights, because I do, and I did in the last meeting, have concerns in relation to the setbacks and the heights. I did have some concern that the larger buildings were pushed onto the neighbouring properties. I raised those concerns. It was taken to the applicant, and this was the compromise. I don't think it goes far enough. In fact, I'm concerned that even the motion or the amendment that Councillor Lewis is putting up does not go far enough. Having said that, in the spirit of compromise and understanding that this is, we have a planning scheme that we need to adhere to, I'm happy to support this amendment.
So are there any speakers against? Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr Mayor. This actually is adhering to the town planning scheme. This, what we're doing here today, is adhering to the town planning scheme, as Councillor Taylor just mentioned. He'd like to adhere to it. It's like, what's going to happen if someone's building in a residential area and they have to build their block of land up, such as on the Esplanade, for flood, for tide levels, and they want to build a two-storey house. We're not going to have the same instance of someone's going to come through the door and say, we can't build that there because it's going to put a shadow-on effect. It's a right of use. I feel this is the right of use. And the other thing I look at here, and I mentioned the other day in our briefing meeting, we've got to look at jobs. We've got to look at bringing people into the region, and this is bringing industry into the region, probably 100 jobs. And one of the biggest things we're lacking in this community is jobs. And I think that if we're going to make it hard for the developers, the word's going to get around that the Fraser Coast is not the place to go and spend your money. Go to places like Bundaberg and go elsewhere. Don't bring your money to Harvey Bay because it's too hard to get an application through. We've got a town planning scheme here that sets it at 8.5 from the height, because the reason that these blocks have been filled, and I want to clarify with you, Councillor Lewis, that those blocks next door aren't filled 1.5, they're 1.2. They're six blocks high, 200 high. So the reason they're filled at 1.2 at the back is so the water from these sites do not flow onto those neighbours' blocks and then give water problems onto the residential side. And I take my hat off to the council to consider that, because that is one of the major problems that we've got in our region, is water flowing through neighbours and with development. And the council have looked at this and said how they're going to fix it. Here we are, we've set these heights to get the water to flow to the streets, for the sewage to work. It's in the town plan that this application here is doing the right thing at 8.5 metres high. And I just think that the councils have got to think very seriously, do we want to move development in this region and see, they're going to spend $50 million. The Auscare here are talking about spending $50 million within our region. And here we are saying that we want to put all these conditions on outside, like it's against our town planning scheme, and we've approved a town planning scheme to be 8.5 metres, and their setbacks are quite generous off their boundaries. Do we want to approve something outside our town planning scheme? Think about it, and I will be voting that against this amendment.
Is there a speaker in favour of the amendment? Are there any further speakers? If not, there's a right of replies. There was a speaker against, yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In relation to those couple of points that were made by Councillor Chapman, it's not contrary to the town planning scheme to impose these sorts of conditions. The town planning scheme envisages that conditions relevant to amenity may well be imposed, and that's essentially what I'm trying to do. I appreciate that there may be good reasons for filling the lot to obtain appropriate drainage and so on. If that's the case, then it's not unreasonable for us to take that into account and to consider what impact that will have on the amenity of adjoining owners, and to seek to impose reasonable and relevant conditions to deal with the impact on amenity which that is going to have. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. I appreciate that we want to encourage development, and the $50 million spend is a fine spend. I'm not opposed to the development, but I don't see that tweaking it in this minor way to achieve a better outcome from everybody is going to have much of an impact on the overall development itself. There's lots of open space there. They can probably achieve the same gross floor area under my amendment as they can without my amendment. They just may need to move the buildings around a touch. We don't know, of course, whether when they consider the requirements of retirement and living, whether two-storey buildings will be appropriate in any event. That's a matter for them. But essentially all I'm suggesting is that they may need to move the building a metre or so further away from the boundary. They can still achieve the same. I would be highly surprised if this kind of minor limitation is going to have any impact on their decision to proceed with this development, given the scale of it. Thank you.
I'll put the amendment. This is to amend the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? 2, 3. That the amendment now becomes the motion. So the movers of the motion are now Councillor Lewis and Councillor Taylor. Are there any? So you're now the mover of the motion. Yep. That's, I can quote you. That's 17.11, where a motion is successfully amended, the amendment becomes the motion, and the original motion will not be put again. Yeah.
I wasn't aware that entailed that I became a mover, just that it becomes the motion.
That's correct, it is.
Congratulations. Okay, were there any further, do you want to speak to your motion? Do you wish to speak to your, as a seconder?
No.
Are there any speakers to the amended motion? Sorry, Jeff is raising his hand.
Sorry, apologies. Through the chair, I have received representations from the applicant to have a condition removed from the recommendation of the report. I don't know if this is when we talk about that now or...
Well, not in 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, yeah. Do you want to raise what that is?
You have to use my access report. Did you just send a text through asking to move that motion?
On page 234 of the report, so 234 of the report, condition number 7 makes reference to an amended plan that we provided to council. And that condition is relevant to this staging for the access. This was previously discussed where we looked at having the development after stage 2 to be accessed by Richard Charles Drive. What's happened is the applicant in his representations has indicated that the necessity of condition 7 is not relevant, not required, as it's sufficiently covered by conditions 4 and 5, which identify the actual access provisions for the development. that staging plan that forms part of the development is actually staging sequencing, not access. So that further indicates why there's no necessity for condition number 7.
Are they disadvantaged by its inclusion?
It's more of just the necessity for providing an endorsed plan. They've indicated that it's not necessary because the actual staging is a sequencing plan, not an access plan.
Well, maybe you could ascertain why they want it removed.
Additional cost.
Well, it's more with regard to the sufficient coverage ensured for council relevant to these access staging within conditions 4 and 5. It's to change the plan with staging is not relevant to access, it's actually relevant to the sequencing of stages as built.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
As an officer, is it your recommendation that that be removed?
Correct.
Councillor Lewis?
Yes, I'm just a little confused because I would have thought that the point of it is to have some control over the access to the site at the various stages. So is it the case that you're saying, given that what we're trying to achieve is that before they proceed with stage 3, they have to be able to they have to be able to obtain access via Richard Charles Drive? Is it your advice that removal of item 7 won't impact on that desire or that requirement of council that they can only use Davis Drive for their access for stages 1 and 2 construction?
Through the chair, that is correct, councillor.
I'll ask, are the mover and seconder happy to amend their motion to delete item 7 from road/access?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Were there any further? Councillor Madden was that?
He's had his closing comments, so there's no debate on it.
I was just going to ask a question, clarification.
No, he hasn't. I just wanted, he didn't. He had a response on the amendment.
Okay.
And I just asked them if they wanted to move as movers and seconders.
Okay.
Yeah.
One was a point of clarification, it's been cleared up by what's on the screen.
Are there any further speakers or questions on the motion which has been amended by vote and amended by the mover and seconder by agreement? Not. So everybody's clear on what we're voting on? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.2, application for development permit, material change of use, preliminary approval, S242 Varying the Effective Planning Scheme at Chapel Road, Nickenbach. That's pages 245 to 338. Yep, and the motion is on page 246. Is there a mover for that motion? Councillor Everard. Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Did you wish to speak to this?
Yeah, well, yes. Just very, very good to see confidence in the Harvey Bay area and this expansion in the Nickenbach catchment area. I think this is going forward. This is going to be great for the region.
Councillor Taylor, a seconder.
No, I don't need to speak.
Is there any further speakers or questions? Not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is 10.3.4, the land management plans for Chile Lagoon, Mariah Creek, and Drowned Island. And that's page 411 to 480. Sorry.
10.3.3, page 339.
Sorry, I missed that one. Item 10.3.3, there's a very good use having a deputy mayor, is other change of application, preliminary approval variation request, and that's pages 339 to 410. And the recommendation is on page 341. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Mattern? There's seconded Councillor Chapman. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I will on this particular one. I'm noting a change of density in the property from a higher density to a lower density. And that's reflected, I believe, by the developer's understanding the market conditions. So it's great to have areas where you're going to have high density, but if you can't develop them, they sit back. And I think it's important for council to look at a lower usage, a lower density usage. So I think this is a practical application of the town plan to meet the economic circumstances that we're currently facing.
Just a question.
I'll ask Councillor Chapman a second if he wishes to speak first. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of questions in relation to that matter that Councillor Madden's raised. I was just trying to get my head around the alteration to the density. The proposal on page 340, it refers to the current proposal with a projected yield of 149 residential buildings. That's on page 340. On page 344, where there's a history of the previous approvals, it refers to an approval in 1997 of a plan showing 152 residential units. There's also a reference to a later MCU in March 2013. That doesn't indicate whether there was any change to the residential units, so I'm just trying to ascertain whether we've got to change it from 152 to 149 or whether the change is different. That's my first question. Perhaps we'll get an answer on that and I'll come back to the next one.
Jeff, are you able to respond to that?
Yes. Through the chair, the historical permit is identified for a resort development. So it mentions unit numbers that's relevant to a multi-storey resort part of a golf course. They've moved away from that medium density development and gone to a low density environmental housing lots. So the numbers are identified in the report, I think are within the actual summary that's in page 340. That's exactly the numbers as proposed. So there isn't actually any greater numbers than what is actually part of the reconfiguration, which will then come through as a subsequent code-accessible application to council.
And just to follow up to that before I get to my second question, on page 341, the second last dot point says the residential development will be extended to the boundary of Lot 5. Lot 5 currently provides a buffer to the adjoining environmental reserve, and then it's got in brackets unformed road. So is it the case that there's no plan that easily identifies the three lots that are subject to this application? Is that really just a long, skinny, in effect, unformed road, that Lot 5?
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor.
So what we've got in effect is that we've got a very slight reduction in the number of residential units, but an expansion of the site coverage of effect.
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor.
Thank you. And Mr Mayor, my other question relates to the issues which were raised by Ms Loxley this morning on the golf course, and in particular she is concerned about the area in the more southern part of the proposed golf course between Endeavour Way to the west and Iris Boulevard to the east. As I understand it, but perhaps you could just confirm for me, this application has no impact on the existing approval in relation to the golf course, but there will be an opportunity to address her concerns at a later stage when the golf course is proposed to be developed in itself. I wonder whether you could explain that to me and for the benefit of the public as well. Thank you.
Through the chair, Councillor, the actual area to the south, the intent is for that to be preserved as part of the golf course. It's a large water body. We know how it actually currently exists, but the application does identify that it is to be maintained. As you mentioned with regard to the change application, the change is relevant to the actual northern part of the actual development, which is the footprint for the residential component. But notwithstanding, we are required to do a review relevant to what has changed from 2013 to now. That included the state agency's concurrence referral. They have maintained their conditions for anything that is identified to be of any significance as ecological over those areas and water bodies is to be managed in accordance to rehabilitation plans. And that includes, as mentioned on 351 of the report, it mentions that there will be an environmental management plan, vegetation and flora management plan, and a weed management plan, and a wetland rehabilitation plan. So anything that occurs through that area is undertaken in accordance to those reporting mechanisms. They will occur at a subsequent operational works stage, and that's where we will see a more detailed design of the golf course, and which then will factor those environmental and ecological elements. So in summary, the intent is to maintain that area. It does form part of the setting, and that is the actual reasoning why they do like to pick those areas as they are.
Are there any further speakers or questions? If not, I'll put the motion, moved by Councillor Mattern, seconded by Councillor Chapman. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is 10.3.4, the land management plans for Chili Lagoon, Mariah Creek, and Round Island, at pages 411 to 480. Yep. And the recommendation is on page 411. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hanson. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, these plans have, of course, gone out for public consultation, and so we've all seen it before, as has the public. The management plans have been tweaked slightly in response to the various submissions which were made by members of the public. I won't go through them, they're detailed in the report. Quite a number of the suggestions have been accepted. It's clear when you read the submissions that some of these submissions have been made by people who are quite erudite in the field of economical, environmental management, and I think it's a great advantage to the council to have this input from members of the public in matters such as this, and I thank those people who've gone to the trouble of making these submissions. Our plans will be better for it, and it's great to see that kind of input from the learned members of the community out there. Thank you.
Councillor Hanson, are there any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 10.3.5, amendment of the 2018-2019 fees and charges schedule, pages 481 to 483. Is there a mover for the recommendation over 481 and 482? Councillor Mattern. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Everard. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mattern? Are there any speakers? Yeah. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We've dealt with item 10.3.6. Item 10.5.1 is energy procurement, large metered sites. That's pages 500 to 507. The recommendation is on page 501. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Chapman. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Light. Do you wish to speak to it? No. Any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 11.1, notice of appeal of motion, tender for integrated enterprise solution. That's page 508 to 509, and that will be moved by Councillor Everard. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mattern, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just better explain it. This solution's is designed so that the council can further investigate service suites for the whole of council. At the moment, we're using one particular supplier, and they do have a product that would suit. And all the officers have requested that we revisit this one and take the organisation forward.
Councillor Mattern, are there any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is item 11.2, Park in Augustus Estate. This is in the supplementary pack. Councillor Light, please leave the room. This is page 657. and it's moved by Councillor Chapman. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Hanson is seconding it. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I just looked at, last week we had a workshop on master plans on community parks, and I look at the Augustus estate, there's 500 houses in there, there's another 300 to be built, so that gives about 800 houses within that Augustus estate, and the master plan that they did have in there hasn't been filed. It's got a dog off leash area being put in the middle of it, and I just like to move this motion so we actually put up a master plan for Augustus Estate and get the community involved and just see exactly what they want, so it goes into a process of looking after that area.
Councillor Hanson, a seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I think this is a common sense motion. I support 100%. Augustus Estate really needs something like this, and I think it's going to be good to involve the community and to see it go forward and make it a more livable place.
I'll ask for speakers against first.
Question.
Or questions? Yep.
Mr CEO, in relation to this matter, is it my understanding that this park is a district park that was identified in the discussions in our master plan sessions. I guess that's my first question, and that's why it would be deemed appropriate to have a master plan. The second part of my question is, if this was identified through a discussion in a workshop, how do we know that there are other district parks that do not have a master plan associated with them?
I can answer the first part of the question. I'll refer the second part to the Director of Development Community. Yes, my understanding is that a district park and should be master planned. With respect to, are there other parks district parks that haven't been master planned? I'll have to refer that question to the Director.
Oleander Park in Toronto?
I don't know. Jane?
I think it's
It might have to be taken on notice.
or the motion should be changed to reflect. That's right. It's not
Yeah, I couldn't confidently answer that question. I have to take one of those.
So,
I'm going to ask a question that may sound like a statement, but I'm sure that it's a question. Would it be more prudent to form a motion that does a review of district parks to determine which ones should be master planned, and then that should be brought back to council, rather than identifying the one that doesn't and giving that the treatment? I think a more balanced motion should deal with a whole of region approach.
I'm going to try to be very diplomatic in my response so I don't offend. It's always preferable to have a strategic approach than an ad hoc approach. This park is a district park, it should be master planned. There may be other parks that are district parks that similarly aren't master planned. That's an answer to the question we have to take on notice. My preference would be to identify all those district parks that aren't master planned and develop a priority, have the council develop a priority in terms of which parks it would like to have master planned first to provide the greater benefit to the community. Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, so would the mover and the seconder be willing to consider a whole of region approach by identifying or a report that identifies the district parks and the appropriate action for each of those parks, including Augustus Estates?
That's a completely different.
Yeah, I don't think that could be that would completely change the motion.
Can I just point a clarification?
Yes.
Point of clarification here to the CEO. When we were actually going through those master plans, and I highlighted to you and showed you how many dwellings were around, it was to your amazement that there wasn't a master plan over this. So this is where this motion has come from, is to try and put this one on with the other master plans. And if there is other areas out there that councillors feel that there's district parks,
they can bring the same motion to the next meeting.
Or I mean, perhaps a third leg could be that we identify other district parks that don't have master plans.
Yeah, that would be an amendment, that wouldn't
Drive around looking for
That wouldn't change it. I mean, that's a proposal that could be put to the mover and seconder.
I'm quite happy to add that. I'm quite happy to add a third part, is that we, and other district parks.
So if I can clarify that, my understanding is that you're happy to add a third part, which may read that a report be provided to council identifying other district parks within the Fraser Coast Regional Council local government area, and whether they have been master planned.
or just appropriate treatments. I mean, yeah.
No. So, I mean, they're effectively master planning without even knowing how many it would be.
Yeah, so in the third, then rather than refer to I mean, there may be cases where you don't need to master plan a district park for whatever reason, so it would be a case of identifying the district parks and the appropriate treatments required for each park, rather than necessarily calling for a master plan for each one of those.
No, I'm not suggesting that we call it for master plan, they provide a report that identifies if the master plan has been undertaken.
Yeah,
that would, rather than appropriate treatment, that resolution requires to go and physically inspect every single one and check it off against what might be required.
Yeah.
So the report that identifies other district parks without a master plan.
Yeah, simple.
Is that acceptable to the mover and seconder?
Yes.
Yep.
Just one point there.
One other reason this was brought up is a lot of those blocks, those 500 blocks that are in there, they're around about 600 square metres, and the houses take up most of the area, and so the open space for all them houses is the park. And that's why we're looking, if we do it, the reason we want a master plan is so we do it properly from the start, and we're not doing ad hoc, and so it flows with our whole community in that area.
Are there any further questions for a speaker against? Yep, Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm speaking against this motion, not because I don't want Augustus Park to get whatever it deserves, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but because I do think that this is still an ad hoc way to deal with it, given that the first two leaves of Councillor Chapman's original motion is still there. And that as a result of that, it doesn't give us the opportunity to develop a priority list. It's going to require us to produce a master plan for this particular park within 6 months, whereas there may well be other parks where the appropriate planning would really have a priority. I've been able to have a look at the park subsequent to Councillor Chapman raising the issue, and I must say it's in much better shape than, say, the Endeavour Way Park, which has been master planned, and indeed I think it's in much better shape than Endeavour Way will be after we complete that master plan. It's got a splendid children's play area. There was a mother there with a couple of children. When I visited and I spoke to her and I said, what is it that you think this park needs? She said the one thing it needs is shade over the children's play area. I doubt it needs a master plan to work that out. I think that would be obvious. It's the sort of thing which could be brought forward by the divisional representative or whomever. It may well be that a master plan would indicate other beneficial developments as well, but that was her view, that was really the only thing that was lacking in what's a pretty attractive park. I'm not opposed to looking at this park, and I don't want Councillor Chapman to think I'm being difficult with him, but I just think it's the wrong way to go about it, bearing in mind that we really don't know whether a 6-month time frame or 5-month time frame is appropriate for officers, and we don't know what the other priorities might be. I think it's just the wrong way to deal with it. I'm not opposed to the concept, but I'd rather it was dealt with more appropriately. So I'll vote against it. I'd be happy to vote for a motion which dealt with the matter in a more structured way, as I've indicated. Thank you.
Are there any speakers in favour of the motion? I'll call for our further speakers for or against then. Okay, I'll put the motion. Oh, you're right, replies there was a speaker against. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'll take you on board, Councillor Lewis, that what you say is shade shelters. I actually was out there a couple
of weeks ago, and this is where a lot of it come from, is a couple of things that they were after was shade shelters, toilet block, pathways through their park. They were looking at a bus shelter if they get a bus to run into the region. They want more parking in the area. They want a water fountain, and they want tree planting. So if we just go out there and put shade up and do all these things, put a water fountain in and everything like that without a master plan, that's me working ad hoc. What I'm trying to do is do exactly what we're doing with other parks, put in a master plan so the council knows how the budget and where we're going forward for this area. This area collects 800 residents, roughly about $3,000 a year, which is around about $3 million in rates in our little region. We've also collected infrastructure out of that area, and I feel that with these small blocks there, the only real outdoor area that that little community has got is that park. And I feel that it's a right of us as councillors to deliver to that community a master plan that they can see where they're going, what they're happening. When they actually bought into that region, they actually had a master plan. The developers had a master plan and was handed to the council. But that master plan was not followed, and this is what the community is saying, that they were going to get this, going to get that off this master plan. Now all I want to do is see that implemented back, so the residents out there can see exactly what they're going to get. They don't want it all tomorrow, but a master plan will tell them where it is budgeted. It might be 5 years away before they get a pathway or something like that. But at least the master plan will show the residents in that area what they're going to get. And that's all I ask for, is us as councillors show the residents what they're going to get down the track. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I'll put the motion. All in favour? One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7. All against? 2. Carried 7-2.
Could I call a division, please, Mr.
The division has been called by Councillor Chapman. All in favour, please stand. Sorry, James Hanson. All against, please stand. Okay. All right. If somebody can ask Councillor Light to return to the room. Yeah. The next item. The next item is item 16.1.1. Item 16.1.1. This is in the supplementary agenda pack. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Oh, yeah. 14.1, item page 585. This is Councillor's request for leave of absence for Councillor Hanson from 15th of August to 5th September.
In the supplementary.
Is there a mover for the recommendation on page 585? Councillor Madden, seconded by Councillor Truscott. Are there any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Have a great time.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Carried unanimously.
I want to know where he's going.
The next item is item 16.1.1, pages 586 to 647, Fraser Coast Sports Precinct Business Plan. And Councillor Taylor is leaving the room. The recommendation is on page 587. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Everard. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Truscott. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Everard?
I've lost count of how many times I've spoken about it, but look, this is just to receive the report, the business plan, whatever you want to call it, and continue to undertake community engagement around the stakeholder engagement around the project. So I welcome the progression of the project.
Councillor Truscott, a second, or do you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think just to reiterate the comments of Councillor Everard, that this is purely receiving and noting the report. It doesn't specifically tie us to anything in it. As was seen in today's paper, I think it's a bit different to that, and rather, as the recommendation states, that it's providing a broad direction, just to reiterate that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the officers or speakers against? If there is, Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'd actually like to speak against this business plan because I honestly feel that I've been quite public about it. There's no detail. There's no detail. It's like me going to a magazine and picking out a photo of a house and going to a builder and saying to the builder, can you give me a price on this, please? Can you give me a price on this photo? How can you do a business plan when you haven't got any detailed drawings? A gentleman that's a qualified quantity surveyor rang me a couple of days ago when this came out in the paper, when this came on the internet, and he's actually read through it, and he said, I'm sorry, councillor, but he said, I have to laugh. That you are making, there's been accusations in here that this is going to raise $48 million for our community. No one's accountable for that figure, he told me, because that $48 million is, no one can judge that figure. This plan could have had $60 million in it and would have made it look good, easy to sell. What I'm saying, it's very hard to accept a business plan, and what was said here before, that we're all we're doing is accept it, and this is no way, this is not moving forward with the project. Since I've been as a councillor, this is not how things work around here. If we accept this will be, let's go, let's forward on and let's spend this money for the community. I'd really like to see an amendment that this lay on the table until the public have actually seen this document. It goes out to public consultation and let the community have a look at it and see what they feel about it. And then they will come back to the council and give us a real opinion on where we spend this money. We've already spent 7.5 plus the extra, which goes up over $13 million. And I'd say plus on top of that too. But the thing about it is, we've got things in here we don't know if we're going to build a stadium. We don't know if we're going to build clubhouses. It's all over the shop. Until we get an original, like a genuine detailed plan showing what it matches up with this business plan, I find it very hard to accept because this is wishy-washy. And I'd like to see the mover and ask him, would you like to accept an amendment to the motion that we put it out to public consultation?
Can I draw your attention? Can I just draw your attention to point 2 of the recommendation? Undertake ongoing stakeholder engagement, investigation, scoping, consideration of options and models into delivery of the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. That is exactly what this document does. It's going out. We will undergo stakeholder engagement. That is members of the community. It's in black and white, page 587.2.
Can't believe it. I cannot believe it.
Are there any speakers in favour? Or any questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll speak in favour of this, and as has been pointed out, the recommendation that we're voting on is that we receive the plan, which will provide broad direction on options to deliver, and that we undertake ongoing engagement and so on. We're well down the track with this project. The need for it is very well established. It's clear from the number of clubs and associations which are contacting the CEO, looking to start moving their enterprises out to this precinct, that there's a need, and a very strong need. There's been heaps of public consultation. It's great that there'll be further public consultation in relation to the specifics. This document doesn't purport to lay down a precise blueprint for how it will proceed, and that's very wise because we wouldn't want to lock ourselves into that. There are so many variables in terms of, for instance, demand, the availability of grant funding and so on. It's unwise and it would be unhelpful to attempt to lock ourselves in to anything quite specific about how this is to proceed. We need to be, in the words of our great Prime Minister, nimble and agile about this, and that's going to be the way this can be handled. It gives a broad outline of what the costs might be and a broad indication of what the benefits might be. Now, if the benefits were out by a factor of 20 or 30 or 40%, the benefits to the community would still be huge. And it seems to me there's absolutely no point in delaying the development of this program any further. I'm just, I had my reservations about this program 2 or 3 years ago. I've done the research, I've talked to the people. I'm now persuaded that we need to proceed with this and that there's a real demand and that it will be a real benefit to the whole region. I know that there were some figures there that were alarming, but I pointed out, for instance, that these sorts of public facilities cost councils money, and the examples I gave when we discussed this the other day we're looking at 1 to 2 million in operational expenses a year on this project, depending on what stage you're at. Compare that to, say, the Brolga, which costs us a net 1.04 million a year. The Maryborough Showgrounds, 807,000. The Maryborough and Harvey Bay swimming pools combined, 1.6 million. Libraries, 4.2 million. I mean, that's the sort of money which it costs councils to provide facilities to the public, just as it costs them money to provide facilities such as roads and drainage. This project has a real transformative effect for our community. I don't see any benefit in trying to obstruct it. I would hope that those councillors who have some reservations would hop back in the boat and start rowing in the same direction, because I think that's the way we're going to attract funding. There may be some level of public disquiet out there, but I would have thought that the election results, apart from anything else, the election results in the mayoral and Division 10 by-elections indicate that those candidates who were not enthusiastic about the project returned only modest votes. That would suggest to me that there's no great groundswell of opposition to this project. Certainly the people I talk to out there are keen for us to get a move on with it, and so I think we should pass this resolution. It still gives us lots of flexibility, still gives us the opportunity for lots of consultation. Let's get moving. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers against? Councillor Madden has a question.
I think one of the things I wanted to clarify, or probably clear in my head, but I think the general public need to be clear about it too, is there is mention in this report of the stadium. There was not in the previous report. I just want to clarify that if council in the future was to determine that it was going to be a stadium that would be with community consultation, it's not just something that's going to suddenly land on the deck.
Correct?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's there as an option, and that would be something that would be subject to a great deal of community consultation.
And I think the community now needs to know, based on what was in today's paper.
Yeah. Don't believe everything you read. Councillor Hanson, is that?
It was a question, you've answered it, I'm fine.
Yeah, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's probably no surprise that I'm going to say a couple of words here. And first of all, let me say that there's no greater advocate for sport in the room than myself, having 5 kids all partaking in sport over many, many years, and a couple of them at the highest level, the state level. So I think it's very important to get our kids out there and play sports better than sitting on iPhones, iPads and computer games. But having said all that, it's also no secret that I've been a big opposer of this project, and this project continues to evolve. It evolves so much that Charles Darwin will almost be happy to be the author of it. He's the author of evolution.
Do you believe in evolution?
Not really, no. No, I don't believe in evolution. But he would be proud to put his name to it, because this thing has continued to evolve. What we talked about many years ago to what it is now. It continues to evolve. You look at the so-called business plan, which we waited for many, many years to turn up, and then it turns up 6 days ago, and now we're asked to endorse it. And we had all these clubs supposedly coming forward now saying they need to have the space, but it just goes to show they need to have the business plan 2 years ago, so you could have addressed these issues way back then. So I have great concerns, and fundamentally I still oppose the project. I still think that when I have people, particularly in my division, who haven't got the basics of life to live in a first world society like sewage and decent drainage, and I'm particularly talking about Howard, I cannot look those people in the eye and say we can put money into this, and we can't find money for your residential sewage. And I agree with putting commercial sewage out there, but we still haven't got residential sewage. So look, I just can't support it. It's just a continual spending spree. The public are already stretched to the limit. They cannot be asked to continue to throw money into this project. I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers in favour? Any further speakers against?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Just a couple of points I'd like to make. Councillor Everard talked about in number 2, undertake ongoing stakeholder engagement. To me, it's very interesting that we see that it doesn't say community as well. Stakeholder to me means directly the clubs that want this, or so-called people that want it. I thought that we'd add the word community would have been more prudent and transparent.
Stakeholder, the community is stakeholders.
To me, a stakeholder has got a stake in it. Yes, you could argue that the community obviously has a stakeholder in it because they're paying for it. Previously in the last term, in this term, is that we've heard, and Councillor Lewis mentioned about how the CEO's met with people regarding the support of this. I'd love to meet those people because maybe I might be convinced. But I've never met them. I've never been invited to a meeting. I've never been, in fact, I did a great gate crashing meeting in the last term at the Beach House Hotel because I wasn't invited, but I went along anyway. Maybe if you can engage with the people that have some doubts about this project, we might be convinced as well, but I can't support it.
Happy to organise a meeting with the stakeholders.
Are there any further speakers? If not, I'll pass it to the mover who has the right of reply, if he wishes to exercise it.
Look, this has this project has been going on for the amount of times it's come back to council meetings. It's horrendous, the impact on the community, the impact on council. There is a demonstrated need for this project that has been identified since 2006. This isn't something that's just popped up and we've decided to build. The community of Hervey Bay has grown. We need to supply sporting fields. This morning, the Mayor and the CEO spoke about the impact of sporting tourism on our region. I challenge anyone around this table to not know someone who benefited from the recent Touch Carnival. With a facility like this, the possibilities are endless of what the transformation will be if we can attract the right events to our region and what difference that will make to our region. It comes down to jobs. Long term, it comes down to jobs. I might be looking at this the whole wrong way, but I think our job as elected members of council is to set the region up for the future, and I think this is a pretty good base to go forward. The community deserves it, and we cannot afford to miss out on any further opportunities. Because I'm sure as I'm sitting here, that the Sunshine Coast will take those events, Bundaberg will take those events, and the economic benefit we will miss out on will destroy our region. It's not rocket science. We need to go forward. this is an opportunity to go forward in a very balanced and structured way.
I'll now put the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. All opposed? 3. Carried 6 to 3.
Division required, Mr. Chairman.
Division called by Councillor Hanson. All in favour, please stand. All against, please stand. Councillor Wright, Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Hanson. Just with the 4,
I think it's missing Dave.
Yeah, missing GL in 4. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, could I just ask Councillor Everard to have a look at the growth thing with me at the end of the meeting, because from 2006 till now, it really, it's something interesting for him.
Okay, the next agenda item is item 16.1.2, application for new leases, Sprays Coast Sports Precinct. That's pages 648 to 651. Is Councillor Taylor staying out of the room for this?
Yes. I'm happy to move this one too.
So the recommendation on that is on page 649. The Councillor Everard has indicated he's willing to move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Truscott. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, I think it's said enough.
Yeah. Do you wish to? Are there any questions or speakers? Councillor Madden.
Reference to the term?
So,
She needs to be, item 1 should be changed to 6 years.
okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So there's an amendment where 5 becomes 6. Are there any further questions or speakers? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, Mr Mayor. This motion that we're putting up today delegates the authority to the Chief Executive to negotiate and execute leases for the term of 6 years with the Harvey Bay Netball, Football Queensland Limited, and Harvey Bay Oztag Sports Association. I really feel that with us doing this and handing the power over to the CEO to negotiate this, us as councillors are losing control of what assets we're leasing out. When we look at, I haven't got a problem with Harvey Bay Netball, I haven't got a problem with Harvey Bay Oztag, but I have got a problem with Football Queensland. I went on the internet yesterday afternoon and had a look at Football Queensland. Football Queensland is a limited. There's a company out of Brisbane that is actually set up as to raise money. It's got sponsors and everything running after it. There's a group of sponsors that are backing it. They've got mortgage brokers, everything like that. They're virtually a business that we are leasing, and I can pull $6 out of my pocket for the next 6 years and show you what $6 really looks like. And when you look at this, what we've actually spent here on soccer is around about $8 million. Now, it doesn't justify, with clearing the site and preparing everything for that site, is around about $8 million out of a figure of $14 million roughly. So what I'm saying here, here's this council using community money and giving the powers to the CEO to lease our premises for $6 after we spent $8 million on it. I'm right against this, because any business that walks through the door and looks at this thing, they must be laughing. And I've got the breakdown of what Football Queensland are, and I'd really say they're a business. So I thought this was to be built with local money for local people. I know local people will be using it, but the powers to be will be running out of Brisbane.
Perhaps our officer could speak to that about whether this company is a profit company or a not-for-profit company. Yeah.
Oh,
Push it up.
push it up. Gotcha. Thanks.
We do have a few instances where we have had community group style leases with other public limited by guarantee companies. So in these particular situations, we've sought legal advice and we've altered some of the clauses within our community leases to be able to be applied to the correct act so that we could still cover our risk in the same terms and manners as what we would do with a not-for-profit organisation under the Incorporated Associations Act.
So there's still a company.
But they're limited by guarantee, so we ensure that with the clauses in the lease, that we protect council's interest in the same manner that we would do with a not-for-profit organisation. So the result is the same.
So they're a not-for-profit incorporated organisation.
Run out of Brisbane.
It
doesn't matter, they're still going.
Mr Mayor, can I also respond?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Run out of Brisbane.
Mr Mayor, thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to some of the matters that have been raised. Just in relation to delegated authority to negotiate and execute leases, this is no different to the delegated authority that council gives me on a wide range of matters. And as discussed at the workshop held with councils, if there's any substantial variance to the normal lease conditions that we would apply, I would be bringing that back to council for discussion. In relation to $1 a year for 6 years, there's been no discussion that that's what the lease fee is. I'm not sure where that came from. There's a whole range of things that need to be considered as part of that, including the payment of water, electricity, contributions to ground maintenance. This is a very complex lease arrangement, which is substantially has different circumstances than some of the other ones as well. But if there were going to be substantial variances of what is considered to be normal lease arrangements, that's something that I come back and seek councillor feedback on.
Are there any speakers in favour of the motion? Any further speakers against or questions? If not, the mover again has a right of reply. I'll put the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. That's carried 6-3. Councillor Taylor can re-enter the room. The next item is item 16.1.3, pages 652 to 654. The Fraser Coast Sports Precinct project deliverables. Councillor Everett is going to move the motion on page 3. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, members of the public. This variation, our budget allocation, will allow approximately 2,500 people to start using this facility next year. So it's over 2,500 people will be out there activating the site. I think that's a good result. That is a vote of confidence in the project, in the council, in our community. I've been out to the site with the groups, the sporting organisations who are going to use this facility. You know what? They're excited. This is a transformational project, and this council did not even have a sod-turning celebration, councillors. That's pretty ugly. But you know what? We have got 2,500 people who will be using this site and who are excited about this site being activated. I think this is a great step forward. I look forward to seeing kids running around playing sport on the Fraser Coast Sports Precinct. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Does the speaker wish to speak to us? Councillor Lewis.
Well, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll just add that I was at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast this morning talking to a lady who had been fairly extensively involved in OzTag. And she said, you know, OzTag is as we've heard from other sources, OzTag is a very rapidly growing sport. She thinks it'll become one of the major sports in the Fraser Coast area. And her question to me was, do you think there's any chance they can be out there by September? I said, well, I didn't think perhaps September was a realistic goal, but nonetheless, there were prospects within 6 months or thereabouts. Sea Leaf, no doubt in my mind that there's a terrific demand from that group. And as I understand it, there's a similar demand from the other organisations. I commend this motion. I think we need to proceed with dealing with the physical structures as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against?
I have questions.
Yeah. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have questions. I don't know who to the Director or to the CEO. On page 653.3, officers' recommendation, point 1, emergency vehicle access or weathers. I need clarification. I know it sounds really good about emergency vehicles having access, but I wouldn't think that they would be needed anyway if the site wasn't going to be used, if we weren't going to spend the money anyway. So in other words, 1.2 million is to build the ring road. Is that, or part of that money is to build that? Is that correct, Mr. CEO?
So, thank you. Good question, Councillor. The $1.2 million is to be allocated to those 9 activities. Emergency vehicle access or weather, footpaths and disabled access to playing surfaces, netball court surfacing, 2 clubhouse acts, so that the first 8 are essential to be able to allow those sporting clubs to be able to complete in February. And the ring road, if we can get stretched to 1.2 to do the ring road, that would be part of it as well. Otherwise, we're looking at seeking additional funding, and that's part 3 of the resolution. The Council delegates authority to the CEO to seek funding for the sports precinct projects from external sources, including but not limited to federal and state program. So it's unlikely that that 1.2 is going to supply all of those 9 items, and we might have to seek some external funding to deliver them.
So in a parallel universe, if we stop this project right now, the project is not usable as it is at the moment.
That's correct.
So I know I'm being pedantic on this, but when it says emergency vehicle access, is that if they would only be needed if the project was up and running to respond to an incident there.
From February when the teams want to be out there, it'll be required at that time. Yes.
Okay, I think I'll leave it at that, but I just, with respect, whoever wrote that, I think it's probably unnecessary to say that because I know it sounds good, but I'll get on to the next question. Netball court surfacing, I thought it was surfaced. I was out there.
No, that's just concrete.
So the netball surface, there is no surface on the concrete. There's lines, but to be able to provide netball facilities at a contemporary standard, reduce injuries, surfacing would be required. And I think the plan provides for acrylic surfacing with cushioning to 2 premier netball courts and just painting to the other courts.
So, Mr. CEO, I can't quite remember when I was out there, are they currently, the surface that's there now, is it painted with lines?
It's painted with lines.
So, for it to be...
It's painted with lines, but it's still concrete.
Yeah, it's painted with lines, it only has lines on it. Yes, that's the biggest one.
My point is this, so it's been painted,
yes.
So will this new surface cover over those lines?
Yes, it will.
So my question to the CEO, why was it painted then in the first place?
Because the netball courts were built to the budget. When the council reduced the budget to $7.5 million from $10 million, things had to be cut. The expectation was that would provide the bare minimum, and the Netball Association would, having had a lease, would be able to provide, be able to get external funding to provide for the acrylic surfacing of the courts at some future point in time. The concerns are that to be able to attract regional netball activities to the area to reduce the injury, that it's ideal that they be put in place as of when they start, and they haven't been able to raise funds to do that because of a lack of lease. Now, that in terms of that the acrylic surfacing, that's one thing I intend to raise as part of the lease arrangement and the lease payments as to what sort of contribution netball may make over the life of the lease for the surfacing.
So just to clarify, the concrete was painted with lines to conduct that sport, and now it's been discovered that we've created something or have something that doesn't meet the standards.
It met the standards at the time. I think the contemporary standards, I might need to get the project manager to provide a detailed response, but it meets bare minimum standards at that time. It certainly doesn't meet contemporary standards. Certainly wouldn't be something that the council could be proud in terms of providing for as a sporting facility.
So my question is, when they painted those lines, it never came on their radar to suggest that that was going to be a waste and they would have to be covered up. At what point was it discovered?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question. I'll have to. It was always the question was asked in terms of why is there no surfacing when the council did an inspection, and the answer is because that's what the budget only provided for that.
So there's no consideration from council to come back to council to amend that budget before it was painted?
No, because the council resolution was very clear that that there was absolutely under no circumstances was $7.5 million to be was where we to spend more than $7.5 million. And by the time that we identified that it didn't have an acrylic surface and it wouldn't and it had already been painted, the lines been applied. But I have to stress the line painting would be, we're not talking a significant cost for that painting of the lines.
Okay, and maybe a general question here in terms of the history of this project and its long history, as Councillor Everard said. In the last term, and I think earlier this term, it was very clear that part of the funding for this project to be raised by the clubs through leases and through grants. Previous CEO said that in the first term. It seems to be that we've gone away from that and now we're offering leases without their making a significant contribution to the project.
Can I answer that one?
One doesn't support the other.
Yeah, so a sporting organisation, a club, cannot apply for grants without a lease. So they need a lease before they can start applying for those grants.
So those grants are going to pay for what then? Once they're there, what are they going to pay for?
Whatever the clubs, some of the clubs may want to add other stuff to it. Yeah, stuff, products, services.
Okay. So I can talk to that. The state government generously provided around $1.1 million for clubhouse facilities for both football and netball. My expectation is that going forward, that things, Oztag, for example, will have an interim arrangement with Wide Bay Football to lease some of their facilities, that lighted facilities. But in terms of the ultimate lighting of their 3 fields, my expectation is that they'll be seeking grant funding. They can't do that until they have a lease.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any, I take it they're speaking against? Are there any speakers in favour?
I've got a point of clarification.
Yeah, a question, yeah?
I've got a point of clarification there. The CEO said that the 7.5 was for the funding of the netball courts, the concrete netball courts, and that's the reason that we only went to the concrete netball courts with the lines on it, because we run out of money. Well, there was a grant put in by the state government, gave $1.964 million. And in that $1.964 million, there was a separate portion, C, a previous tender of $864,000, installation of 8 concrete netball courts, turfing 2 premium football fields, including subsoil drainage and line marking for 2 regular football fields, plus 2 satellite clubhouses at the cost of $550,000 each to enable sports and events to activities to be on the site. Now that money, of those concrete courts, was actually come from the state government. It never come out of that $7.5 million, and it was only asked for concrete courts on this in that application.
Just one of the things I should clarify, just in relation to, thanks for that clarification, Dennis, appreciate it. Just in relation to the debate around the previous motion, I'd just like to put on record that, Dennis, when you talked about Football Queensland, the lease is with Football Queensland Wide Bay, so it won't not based in Brisbane, it'll be based here. That's my understanding.
Wording says Football Queensland in the paper, and Football Queensland doesn't say Football Wide Bay.
Well, it'll be Football Queensland Wide Bay.
Well, could I ask for
and
that?
that's who we're having the discussions with.
Change, please.
Happy to change that.
Are there any further speakers? There being no further speakers?
I'd like to
Well, you asked the question.
That's just a question. Just like to point out here that we brought this up last Thursday, I could say that, about the funding, and there was $1.2 million that was put aside from rates. We've just accepted a business plan, and I find it hard if you try to explain to me that about funding, but it says no further debt to be anticipated as council contributions to capital expenditure will be funded from cash, is virtually reserves, and all council contributions to capital expenditures are funded through borrowings. So here we are, we've actually just accepted the business plan today, but we've just taken the money off the ratepayers, and I don't feel that is what it's not saying.
Okay, I think that's entirely incorrect reading of the business plan. Firstly, we haven't endorsed, we haven't accepted the business plan. The business plan simply provides an indication of what the economic impact might be. The council has made absolutely no commitment to borrowing, to using ratepayers' funds. It's simply made a commitment to use the business plan as a guide, a guiding document for the development of the precinct, and to continue to engage with stakeholders. There is absolutely, and I can't stress this enough, because I have to take my direction from the council, and I've got absolutely no direction from council in relation to its position about funding or using ratepayers' money. That's all subject to future discussions as part of the budget process. So that's an incorrect interpretation of the business plan.
Are there any further speakers in favour?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the CEO did step in there when I was talking.
Authorised responding.
I thought you were responding. Are you
Oh, yeah, I haven't finished with his. Can I state that we know that this $1.2 million what we're going to spend isn't going to finish what we're going to do here. We definitely know that that's not going to finish it, because there's been other things added to this. I really feel that to do this properly, and this is where this whole project is going, is we're spending 1.2, but we're going to come back and we know that we're going to ask for more money down the track. Why can't we do a detailed plan of exactly what we had? If we would have done a detailed plan at the start to say what was happening with this whole project, we would have known that we would have had to have disabled access. We would have known that we would have had to have emergency vehicles getting to this site. We would have known exactly where we're travelling, and step by step what expenses this is going to cost. We are now approving this money here, knowing that we're going to come back at another meeting and ask for more money, because we know that we've added things to that figure, and we're not sure if that's going to be the right figure or not. So I just ask this council, let's do a detailed plan and be honest with our community, and let our community know exactly what we're spending here. Because doing this project is like someone building a house and halfway through it saying, let's throw an ensuite. Oh look, we better throw another bedroom on. Every time you do that, it costs you more money, everything changes. If we had a detailed plan right from the start, better planning is better preparation for the whole process of the sports precinct.
Are there any further speakers in favour? Any further speakers? If not, just as mover wish to write a reply?
I don't think I should. I'll be in the best interest of the community to shut them down.
I'll put the motion. All in favour? 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? 3. That's carried. Councillor Everett has called for a division. All in favour, please stand. Truscott? Lewis? Anne Madden? George Seymour? Darren Everard? Stuart Taylor? Daniel Sims? All against, please stand. Roll call. James Harrison, please. Captain. We've dealt with leave of absence. We have lunch here. Perhaps we'll take a break if somebody wants to move that we adjourn for lunch. Move Councillor Sanderson, seconded Councillor Mattern. Put the motion that we adjourn. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll need a motion to reconvene. Is there a mover? Councillor Madden. Is this Councillor Lewis? I put the motion that we reconvene. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously. So, Madden and Lewis. Yeah. Okay, so we're now into general business. The first item we've actually dealt with already, 14.1. Was there any other general business?
So just that, please.
Councillor?
Yep, you happy to raise that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yes.
Councillor Everard?
Yeah, well, we can. Sorry, up the wording again.
Right to remove myself?
Yes. You can get that with that Councillor Taylor's left the room. Declare perceived conflict of interest and left the room. Or procedural, sorry? A real conflict, yeah. So just, and it's left the room. Real conflict, it's left the room.
So, councillors, this is my fault. I didn't pick up that we had the wrong entity. It's not Football Queensland, but Football Queensland-White Bay Limited. And thank you, Dennis.
I'll draw straight from that one.
And rather than having to rescind the motion and all the bureaucracy and legislative requirements that are associated with that, spoke to the mayor and thought it was easy just to pass a new resolution that identified the right organisation. Please accept my apologies.
So this motion is moved by Jared Everard. Councillor Everard, is there a seconder?
Just just to be clear, does this override the one that was had before?
No, adds to the other one.
Adds to the other one, okay, because I can't read it up there, so we're taking your word for it.
So it's exactly the same resolution with just Football Queensland White Bay Limited.
Yes. So who moved the first one?
So
two motions, so it just adds to the previous one by adding Football Queensland White Bay. Otherwise, you'd have to do a rescission, and then there's a whole legislative requirement around that rescission. In relation to Council's resolution, Football Queensland, I won't give effect to that by taking any action.
Yeah, I get it.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Lewis, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I've spoken.
No. Does anybody wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, was it? 6. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. That's carried 6-3. Yep. Were there any further items of general business? Councillor.
I would like to, considering the length of our meeting, our last open meeting, where we had a budget meeting as well as an ordinary meeting, it was a long marathon for all of us. But I'd like to particularly thank Marlene, who does our minutes, that have to concentrate for all that time for several hours. I'd like to personally thank Marlene and the staff members that had to endure that length of time. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to, put our thanks to Marlene particularly.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Any further items of general business? If not, we have a confidential section. Item 15.1 has been identified as section 271E, 15.2, 2751G, 15.3, 2751H, as well as 15.4 and 15.5. Is there a mover that we move into confidential to matter under those provisions? Moved Councillor Everard, seconded Councillor Madden. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. I declare that carried, and we're now going into open. Thank you. You open the doors, Kevin? Yep. Okay, so for the purpose of going into confidential, we dealt with 5 items, 15.1 to 15.5. I'll go to now 15.1 on page 512. This is moved by Councillor Madden and seconded by Councillor Hanson. You wish to speak to it? No speakers? I put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Next item is 15.2, resolution to adopt amendments to the First Planning Scheme. That's pages 539. 40. This is moved by Councillor Everard and seconded, I didn't get that. Who was it second? Councillor Chapman.
In the Mayor, gentlemen, works out.
That's right.
There you go.
Okay. So tables, is that right?
Yeah. It's not a professional, I'll take the point.
Yeah, okay. So that's, do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Everard?
No.
So thanks, speak to it, Councillor Chapman?
Councillor Crawford.
Any further speakers?
think this is great.
Yeah, I put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item is 15.3, backflow prevention devices. This is page 554. Moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Madden. Do you wish to speak to it? No? Any further speakers? I put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. The next item, are you picking up this? All right? Yeah, the next item is Duggan Conservation Park. This is page 571. Have you injured yourself?
I've got witnesses for workers' comp claim.
Yeah.
No, I didn't make it.
You're not one of them.
This is moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Do you wish to speak to it? No? No speakers? I put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Item 15.5 at page 578 is the Enterprise Management System Strategy. Councillor Madden is moving that. Councillor Everard is seconding. Any speakers? No? I put the motion, all in favour? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. There's no further items of business listed on the agenda. Have I missed anything? In that case, I'll close the meeting at 1:32 p.m.
Confidential.